Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Arrow, as well as the season finale of Black Lightning. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you don't want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Arrow, you can skip to what I say about the season finale of Black Lightning. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Arrow. A very good episode. It's kind of interesting because it's like our first episode entirely connected to the future arc, which is so interesting because I'm curious to see what they're going to do in the long run. Are they going to, like, if you're familiar with the Vampire Diaries, season 7, they had like a time skip situation where it was like 3 years in the future. It was kind of like a back and forth situation, and then eventually the series going forward took place at that 3-year point, being that 3 year in the future was the present day. Long story short, what I'm trying to say is I'm curious, is that going to be what we're going to do with Arrow? Like, is 2049 going to be the continuing off point potentially going forward in certain regards? Well, I think it ultimately is going to play out. It's going to be interesting because obviously, like, Legends comes back in like 2 weeks, and obviously I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's coming on before Arrow. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to tie together in that regard, but ultimately we'll see. It ties into a lot of stuff because this episode answers some of the questions I had, because I was like, okay, I didn't know how much of 2049 is, whether there's continuity in that or not anymore from, you know, the first season of Legends. But then Felicity made up, like, you know, her and Mia are talking and like, oh, there's smoke tech, and I'm like, okay, so she totally runs the group now. Like, so that is still continuity. So I figured they would still keep the continuity. I just wasn't sure. So now in my head, I'm like, okay, so the Connor situation and the John Jr. situation, those are two separate situations, or is that the same situation? Because I could have sworn it was like John Jr. was the one from 49. So Connor Hawk is someone completely different, which is interesting. He uses the name Connor Hawk. John does. Maybe that's some reference to his brother. I don't know. Because that's why I was like, I don't know. Like, not unless that was always Connor Hall, but he was just using... Either way, nevertheless, that's where my mind is. Okay, so it's like, yeah, because I was about to say, because John Jr. hasn't come up in conversation. I was like, I thought that's who was supposed to be in 2049, but it's like, maybe it is. Maybe they just got their own situations going on at different points in time. Let's not forget, this is taking place in 2040, actually, I think. I don't think this is even 2049, because the episode is called 2040, which is interesting. So there's still that 9-year period in between, potentially. So it could still be like that. Either way, there's a lot to discuss, kind of getting caught up on those details. But for one, we see that, you know, Mia was getting trained by Nyssa. That came out of nowhere. So now we know where Nyssa is. Well, at least we know where she was at that moment. Well, because it seemed like she was pretty recently still training Mia. So that's interesting. Which also means, like, makes you wonder where's Oliver, because we saw, like, that was happening while she was still low. So it's like, why wasn't Oliver handling her training? Like, something must have happened to Oliver in that time frame. Maybe he was still trying to do the hero thing even while being wanted as a vigilante. I have no idea. But the fact is, like, we saw, like, Felicity there overseeing the training, but not Oliver. Not unless he was, like, bouncing back and forth. But that's the thing is, like, you know, so why go to Nyssa? I guess she's like the only well-trained person that they can let in on a secret. Let's not forget, in the past 30 years, no one else knew about Mia. And so it's just kind of interesting because, like I said, now we know about her, and Roy, and the whole Thea conversation has come up before. It's like, oh, what about her? It's like something Roy doesn't want to talk about. So obviously her and Nyssa and Roy kind of finished up whatever they were doing. Because whatever went down also led to people thinking that Roy was dead too, because later on it's like, you know, Renee's like, oh, not only do you bring my daughter into this, you even brought Roy into it. Roy, I thought you were dead. So that's interesting. Mia obviously gets super pissed at Felicity because she thinks like, oh, you're a vigilante. Because like, it's crazy because for her, it's like she's grown up in a world where vigilantes have been, you know, smeared as being the ones who have been the reason why Star City has kind of fallen into what it is. And I guess when you've grown up your entire life believing that, I'm sure when things kind of started falling apart in Star City, there was propaganda going up. It's like, oh, the vigilantes are the ones responsible for this. Like, the whole point was to make it so that I guess Star City had no more heroes to turn to. I guess that was kind of potentially the whole point, so that more people could rule with an iron fist in certain regards. So, but obviously you have, you know, William and Mia trying to sneak into the Glades by themselves, because I was like, why isn't the rest of the team with you? It's like, apparently because Mia didn't trust him because she still had that vigilante hate. And it's like, even William, like, I knew them when I was younger. They're not bad people. They met with Kevin Dale, who's the one behind a lot of this, because it turns out that, like, his company, Galaxy, is like a front for another group known as Eden Corps, which is like, there's something there about them being a terrible group, in particular a terrorist group, which then makes you, part of me wonders, could this all be present day? Even the stuff with Dante and even the stuff at the end with that thing, it's like, oh, this could be the end of vigilantes, as well as kind of what takes Archer a step further. It's like, you don't think this has anything to do with Hive, do you? Because let's not forget, Hive hasn't been seen since the Damien Dark situation in season 4. They haven't popped up subsequently since then. So part of my brain was like, okay, does that have anything to do with this potentially? Because that mask thing at the end, or whatever it was, that device, it looked like some of the design on it looked like the, honeycombs or whatever you would see from a beehive or something. So that's what made me think of that. Also, interesting side note, I didn't realize this until just now. I guess I just never caught the opening credits. The actress who plays Mia is Catherine McNamara, which, I'm not that familiar with her. I know she's in Shadowhunters. I've never seen the show, but I've caught glimpses of it. But I didn't, because obviously because I've listened to part of the podcast she did with Michael Rosenbaum, in particular, Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum. Second time I've referenced that, which is funny time to actually reference that, considering, it's like he was Lex Luthor, John Cryer playing Lex Luthor and Supergirl, and just interesting timing and stuff like that. Nevertheless, it was just kind of interesting to me. I guess because, like, her character's kind of redheadish in the show, and I don't know if she's naturally a redhead or anything like that. Her character's got, like, bright red hair, and I think maybe, like, this is her natural hair color as a blonde. Either way, it doesn't matter. That's me just getting all technical and stuff like that, kind of going tangent. I just thought it was kind of interesting. That it just clicked in my head. I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that with you. Nevertheless, I did like the kind of bonding between William and Mia in this episode. He's like, okay, you'll be my assistant. She's like, no, if anything, I'd be in a much higher position than just being your assistant. Even later on being like, I'm his associate. And William's like, my associate. Even the whole thing of like, okay, you stand back. We don't know what's going to happen here. She's like, oh, yeah. William's like, oh, we had a brother-sister moment. She's like, yeah, I wouldn't want, something to kind of happen to you or whatever. And he's like, oh, do you care about me? She's like, maybe. And it's like, it's interesting to kind of see their back and forth like that. We also learned that Connor actually works for a group that is supposed to be, was it the Night Watch? They're supposed to be the good side of Argus or something like that, which is interesting considering the fact, well, it kind of makes sense in certain regards, because let's not forget what Lila's whole storyline is about, her trying to root out like all the corruption with this whole Dante situation and Argus being at the centerfold of it. To be fair, we know in the future, 2044 at the very least, Argus was doing their on some messed up stuff, hunting down metahumans and people with powers and stuff like that, which is still something we haven't circled back to with the whole storyline with Zarya and everything. So I guess maybe we're going to, like, that might be as far as we go with that. But I would assume because Argus has heavier ties with this show than it does any other show. Like a little bit in Flash, a little bit in Legends so far, but mainly it's an Arrow thing. So maybe... But I guess, like, even he's kind of deep undercover because he's trying to help them while, like, working with the good side of Argus to try and fix everything that are, like, we don't know. Like, maybe things didn't work out. Because even we get the whole conversation about, like, because what I thought was kind of interesting conversation, because obviously when they rescue Felicity, Mia's kind of pissed because it's like, hey, for once, put your family first, but for Felicity, it's like, as a hero, you kind of have to put other people's needs before your own, even kind of your family, which is kind of like the sad truth of everything. And because that's always the interesting conversation about superheroes, and I always thought it was kind of an interesting thing, because even not John Jr., Connor would talk about the fact is, he never understood why, Diggle and Lila adopted him, but it's like, the fact is that they did, and now he's got this whole... He ended up training to be a hero and stuff like that. And for him, he, yes, was always bothered by the fact that, like, oh, yes, they ended up, chose, picked the world over him. Like, the world came first before him, which, yes, it bothered him. But, with great power comes great responsibility. I was like, can you really say that? And then he was like, Spider-Man. I was like, okay. I guess as long as you reference that. And she's like, and then Mia being like, I don't know comic books. I'm like... Little jokes like that, I don't know why, like, fourth wall breaking stuff like that, just, I don't know why I really enjoy that for whatever reason. It's just, they tickle my fancy the most, I guess you could say. But nevertheless, but is that complicated nature of like when a superhero has to kind of choose other people's, because that's always kind of like, because it's interesting because Mia, you know, and Connor want to be like, we want to be the ones that's important to you, like you choose us over saving the world. That's something I will always go back to with Smallville. Like Lois always felt bad about dating Clark because it was like, you're supposed to be off saving the world and you having a life with me, that's kind of a bad thing. You could be out there just, you know, saving the world. It's like, and you almost feel like you're holding the hero back from doing their thing. So I'm sure like that's bothered like Felicity, like that's something Felicity's probably had to deal with. That's something Iris has probably had to deal with. Like when you're the significant other of a hero, it has that complicated nature to it where you feel like they should be out there doing more and not necessarily being with me. They could be saving a lot more. You know, I'm sure that's a sad, you know, thing that people in that position, you know, when you're the significant other of a hero, like think like that. I mean, at least I think that's such an interesting point to think about with all of that, you know. But I think at this point in time, Mia does kind of finally understand what her, you know, understand what Felicity did, why she did it, you know, because it was like to protect her, you know, especially because even Mia realizes like the reason why she held on to the whole fact of hating vigilantes is because she hated her mom, and she kind of just took that hate and kind of transferred it to all vigilantes because she was reading all this stuff. It's almost like she wanted an excuse to hate vigilantes anyway, and finding out that her mom was one, that she was trying to take down this corrupt corporation, you know. But, you know, it's kind of interesting. It seems like Felicity kind of picked up Oliver's bad habit of keeping secrets. Because that was obviously that's a huge Oliver thing to do. And now Felicity kind of adopted that in that certain regard. But obviously, like, Felicity's not necessarily the same person. Like, obviously, like, because of the whole... Like, obviously, things have kind of gotten back to a good place, but I think Felicity will never be back to 100% the same person she was. Like, a lot of pieces, she'll... Like, in certain regards, she'll be the same person, but I think... Ever since the whole Ricardo Diaz situation, there's been a change in her while Oliver was away, so she changed and she grew, and I think we see pieces of that. I do appreciate that, like, you know, when they're tracking down Kevin later on, and she's like, okay, there's a match near you, Mia. I mean, not match, you know, a target. I mean, I don't even know what you're really into. And she's like, shut up, Mom. And she's like, I'm sorry, rambling is kind of a bad habit. It's like, even 30 years hasn't gotten rid of that, and I love it. Because it's one of, you know, Felicity's more adorable traits. It's always been constant among her, and I love it. I even love kind of going back to what I was talking about, like 30 years and no one knew about it, because Renee came in and he was like, who are you, referencing Mia? And then you have Felicity being like, well, this isn't me and Oliver's kid. He's like, you and Oliver had a kid? It's like, and now Renee's the last one to figure out about everything. I love it, dude. It's so good. But I did love that this also involved, you know, Renee having a change arc, because obviously he went along with everything, because it's like the destruction of Star City is like, we can expand upon what's going down in the Glades, and he, you know, thought it was for the greater good. At the very least, other people are getting moved out and stuff like that. He thought, like, you know, everyone's getting evacuated, because obviously he's known for about the bomb situation for a while, because Kevin kind of made it clear, like, oh, this is what's going on. He had hesitation because there's that hero side of him that's like, yo, whoa. But for him, it's a situation of he thinks this is the only way, because it's like, he's like, you and me done, and we learned a while back, like, vigilante stuff just isn't enough. I mean, we kind of see that now, current day, present day, because obviously they're balancing, you know, working with the police and being vigilantes, kind of, you know, being their own special unit. But it isn't just being a vigilante, it's a little bit more. Which I was surprised that doesn't add any validity to what's going on. To be fair, once again, we might be dealing with a time travel situation where things get changed up, potentially, or maybe this is kind of a fate/destiny situation where it's like, this is the way things are always meant to go down, because obviously we know, you know, with time travel and everything, there are fixed moments in history, but maybe we're going to get a storyline where it's like all this kind of gets averted and stuff like that. So I don't know. I am curious to kind of, because like the whole point, it seems like, because Felicity kind of explains it later on, the whole point of all this is because of Archer. Like, by showing like what Archer's really capable of, they can sell it to, you know, it's the whole point, trying to sell Archer to other people. But like for Felicity, she doesn't want one group to have complete and utter control over Archer and stuff like that. Which, that's the reason why this fight is so personal for her, because she's the one that created Archer, and it's like all the damage that's come about because of it, what this potentially could be in the future, it's on her as a person who created it. And I guess that was kind of like the starting point to her, because I figured as much. I was like, I brought it up before, like, oh, I figured like, you know, the program she was working on, that was referenced like last episode. I was like, okay, so it's got to be Archer that she works on, and it's like, I guess that's what got her in the door to get to, smoke tech, so I don't know, I just thought it was kind of interesting, because I kept bringing it up. I'm like, because I knew that was a thing in her storyline that had not been necessarily hinted at all, but now it's kind of like, okay, so it is confirmed that part of the continuity is still there about her, apparently, like, since she was kind of in hiding and stuff like that with Mia, trying to hide the whole vigilante aspect of everything, like her being, because she never really went into work that often, and I guess that was her main reason behind it and stuff like that. She played the role of the bad guy just so that she could infiltrate the group, and now Renee's kind of doing the same thing, pretending like he's still on the bad guy side of things, because that's the only way to take this group down from the inside. So we do have Team Arrow kind of reunited again after all these years, and I guess it's interesting because it's a combination of OG Team Arrow along with new Team Arrow. And I think that's going to be interesting to see. That's what they ultimately end up doing, setting up. It seems like they're setting up the next generation to kind of be the end-all, be-all for this. Because obviously it's like you have Mia, you have William. I guess, William's going to be the new Overwatch. You're going to have, I guess, Connor to a certain extent being, well, there's a whole potentially being a Green Arrow, potentially being a Spartan, or, I would assume out of anyone, Mia would be the next Green Arrow type of situation. So, I don't know. Oh, yeah, and Zoe being the next Canary. Which, the fact is, it turns out, the way Renee was talking about it, seems like there's actually other Canaries besides her. It seems like obviously no one else has the ability, which also begs the question, like, whatever happened to Laurel then? Because once again, that's still like a lot we don't know. We don't really know what led to Oliver's situation, whatever it is, or even, what happened to Laurel. Obviously, what happened to Oliver's sister and all of this, like, that's still something we got to get back to. Like I said, like, only that little bit at the end was set present day. Everything else was set in the future. So I'm assuming we're going back to present day, going forward with the rest of the season, getting, back up, flash forwards to the futures. But I'm so interested to see how they continue to, structure out this season and just see ultimately what ends up being the case. Like I said, my current thought is that this must be a Hive situation. Once again, they've been set up in this continuity, just haven't had anything done with them since the whole Damien Dark situation. So it would make sense them kind of coming after Star City again in a certain regard. Once again, this is connected to some Eden Corp situation, which I don't know what that is, so maybe we'll find out soon enough. I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. And now moving on to the season finale of Black Lightning. A great finale because a lot of interesting things went down in this episode. So let's break it down. First and foremost, the fact is that Jennifer situation turned out a little bit better than I thought it was. So I know it's kind of interesting because it's like, obviously we get a much better look at her suit this episode. It looks really nice. I think I saw a photo before of it, but I didn't really remember it that well. But obviously because she was all energied up at the end of the last episode, so it's our first time really getting a look at it. But it looks really good. But I thought things could have gotten a lot more disastrous than they did. I love that Lala shows up and Gambi's like, yo, we're not with Tobias. We're good. I even love later when he shows up to actually save Black Lightning. I kind of wanted Lala to have his moment. I had a feeling, part of me was wondering if he was going to come in at the end and kill Tobias. But, of course, it's not going to be that easy. And obviously there's a lot more to this whole situation with Lala. Like, the fact is, like, obviously Tobias is like, oh, like, Lazarus brought you back, but I'm the one that, like, mind controlled you. So it's like, oh, one part was all about control. The next one was to basically initiate all the tattoos. So basically they can all happen over a period of time. 'Cause I guess, like, naturally he'll remember little by little all the different people he killed and their ghosts will come back to haunt him. Obviously at this point in time he's got 3. But I guess eventually it'd get to the point that over time they would happen, but I guess, Tobias just kind of jump-started it. Probably not all of them, but just some of them, enough to kind of, like, cause Lala pain. But I was like, you see Lala punching him, I was like, yeah. I was like, oh, man, no, because Tobias is standing there like it ain't nothing. I also love the fact is Tobias, once again, just showing you how crazy he is up there playing chess with, Tori and just having that conversation. Even Cutter being like, hey, baby, maybe you should get some sleep. The fact is that Tobias didn't appreciate because it almost felt like she was undermining his authority and stuff like that. And he ended up pushing her away. The one person in this world that literally cares about you. I mean, aside from the people you have, the only living person, because everyone else that was on your side, you killed them, the moment they proved not to be worthy and, necessary anymore. So that sucked. Especially after everything, because Cutter went back into the situation after her and Tobias had their falling out or whatever, because it's like, oh, obviously she still cared about him. She thought things would be different. He released all those metahumans, but she's like, don't do that. But shows you he's so obsessed and so pissed at Black Lightning, he's willing to jeopardize what could be his meal ticket with all these metahumans just for the chance to kill Black Lightning, to gather them up later on to have an army to kill Black Lightning. And Cutter tried to tell him, don't do this, and he literally put his hands around her throat and lifted her up like that. But Cutter's Cutter, so she could have done a lot more damage, but she decided just to walk away. But he's like, oh, I got 100, I can find 10 of you by tomorrow. But you can tell it probably hurt him, because it's like, once again, it's like you're turning on the one person who's got your back, who's looking out for your best interests. So there's that. We also got Home Dude popping up, the metahuman who can teleport. I was like, okay, we're finally getting back to you. Who are you? It's like, turns out he's with the Markovians. Didn't see that coming, because I was wondering if it was like Tobias or somebody at the comment. It's like, no, the Markovians, because he wanted Jace. Also, side note, Lynn beat the shit out of Jace. Holy crap. And I even love Jeff being like, wait, he tried to stop it, but then he's kind of like, I kind of don't want to get in the middle of that. It's like, I think he got her, punched her, brought her fist down in her face, and then hit her head against the floor. And I was like, jeez, Lynn. I mean, to be fair, it's like you've been waiting for an excuse to kick her ass, so. But it seems she got taken by the Markovians, and now that's just going to be, obviously that's built up for just building up that army even more. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Then there's the four metas. Black Lightning and Thunder went up against him. I love the fact is that it was like, oh yeah, Tobias took out the power in the city, so Jeff wouldn't have any power to back him up. But when the time came, Lala came in with the save, and when the power did come back on, I thought it looked so dope when Jeff is in the ice and then he powers up and he breaks through. And I was like, that looks so sick. But him and Thunder kicking their asses. I mean, that's at least one, because obviously Joe ended up getting killed by Lala. I'm assuming the other three just got locked up after they got taken out. Then also it's got to be interesting too, because Jennifer can fly because of her energy and stuff like that. And I love that, because it's like now Jeff can fly. It almost seems like Jennifer can fly faster, because it's like a full body energy fly. It's more like a fly, whereas it seems like with Jeff it's more of a glide. But it's also got to suck, because it's like, oh, I'm wondering if that's ever going to come up, because Anissa's going to be like, I'm literally the only one who can't fly, which kind of makes you feel a little bad for Anissa. Speaking of Anissa, it brings up an interesting conversation, because she had the whole thing of like, oh, I'm going to be Blackbird. She's like, because, Jennifer's like, oh, it's going to be harder with Dad's rules and stuff like that. She's like, no, I'm going to still do my thing. And it's like, when it's all said and done, she's like, I'm just going to not go at it alone. I'm going to have backup. I'm going to be smart about it. And Jennifer's like, oh, let me help you out with that. Obviously, their parents would be super against it. They obviously would be super against the whole Jennifer doing the Blackbird thing. But I think that's going to be something we see continuing. Like the fact is because she thinks she can do more good as Blackbird, because she's not held necessarily to the same extent. Because Thunder has kind of looked at this hero, and I guess whereas, Blackbird is more the vigilante to kind of do what needs to be done type of situation. Part of me wonders, is that going to be a situation where she eventually joins up with Grace? Like Grace, when everything's kind of settled, when the storm settles, when the dust settles, she'll eventually find Grace, and eventually they'll be a team together like that, maybe, potentially. I don't know. That's where my mind is. But like I said, maybe it just might be a whole her and I guess it makes sense her name being Lightning, Jennifer's code name. Once again, I think I saw that somewhere before. It might have been something comic book related that I saw that, but I don't remember. But yeah, when it came down to it, I was wondering about it. I was actually shocked that Jennifer actually got there first. But I did like, what Jeff was doing. He was basically trying to absorb the energy. Obviously, it was going to hurt him and everything. And Jennifer's like, stop. But he's like, no, because I'm not going to let you become a cold-blooded killer, And Jennifer stopped because she saw how much damage it was doing to Jeff. Later on, that whole thing at the end, I was scared for a second. I was like, oh, is Jeff suffering some ramifications for that? Because obviously Gambi got super messed up because of it, but I was thinking the same thing was happening to Jeff as well, kind of like later like ramifications for it. But I guess it's like his body processes energy, you know, as a metahuman. So I guess like absorbing her energy like that wouldn't be that much of an issue. It's actually kind of interesting because we got an explanation on Jennifer's suit too. I know I'm all over the place, so I do apologize. But like Jennifer's suit, like it makes sure that energy from the outside doesn't, you know, affect her. Like, she still had to get her emotions in check and stuff like that. What I also thought was kind of interesting, too, is, like, why Perina was telling her to get out. I guess it also comes down to whatever Perina's situation is. It must mean that Perina is connected to, like, the ASA. Like, either she got caught, put in a pit, or she's going to be part of this battle. Because she told, like, because it was just interesting, because for her, she wasn't there trying to keep Jennifer calm in a moment. She's like, now get out, because I guess that space was crumbling, because I guess, like, Perina didn't want her to be... Well, because we haven't seen Perina since, like, she dodged all those when people were coming after hunting down metas. I think it was the ASA people, wasn't it, or whatever. Like, she got away by getting inside of their heads. Like, I'm pretty sure that's the last time we saw Perina. Maybe she might have subsequently popped up afterwards. I don't remember, but I would assume that's it, because she didn't want them to use her as a way of tracking Jennifer potentially. Like, just the fact that she was trying to rush Jennifer out like that makes me wonder, because it almost seemed like, because if you looked at the background, it almost seemed like the space that Jennifer had created was crumbling, and maybe that's the reason why, because she didn't want Jennifer to be there when that place was crumbling. Like, maybe her mind would have gotten lost in that space or something like that. So maybe it's a combination. I have no idea. But I think it is kind of poetic, and you know that when it's all said and done, Jeff is the one that ended up taking down Tobias. Like, freaking ending up with like that backflip kick too. It's like jetting himself up and bam. It's like, that's pretty dope. It's like, I bet you at that point in time you wish you had cut her around, don't you? But that's kind of interesting too, because I was bringing up the ASA and stuff like that, but we see where Tobias got put in a place called the Pit. But it's like, is that an ASA thing, or is that something else? Is that just something the government set up for metahumans in general? It kind of reminds me of, like, you know, if you remember X-Men, like how the place Magneto was kind of locked up in. Kind of reminds me of something like that. That's what it seems like at the very least. But it's like, it is interesting, because it's like, yeah, you didn't kill Tobias, so Tobias is still around, so there's always room for that villain to come back. But like I said, this show has done such an interesting thing, because it's one of the few shows where it's like the main villain has continued. Like, he's continued across 2 seasons now. You know, most DC villains in this case, like, yeah, they might pop up later on in some shape or form. Like, they might be like one-off episode villains and stuff like that, like recurring villains in that regard. But main tier villains typically don't end up being more than 1 season. Like, obviously there's different cases, because you have Damien Dark popping up in, like, you know, obviously Arrow, and then 2 seasons of Legends of Tomorrow, obviously under different contexts, but still. Then you also had all the meta-humans and the pod kids waking up. Now, that's a whole another element that has to be dealt with, too. Not all of them have been found. Some of them have been found, and they're in a situation where it's like they're trying to lay low, but that's going to be an issue all on its own. You even have Jeff, you know, like I said, that moment at the end breaking down. They're like, oh, what's wrong with that? For him, it's like he's so worried because about the way the state Freeland is in. The fact is that, like, he's scared that, you know, maybe one day he's going to look and one of them is not going to walk through that door. But at this moment, this very moment, he's, you know, Lynn is there. Like, you know, especially where they were in season 1. But we're here right now at this end. Lynn is here. Anissa's here, you know, Jennifer's here, and it's like, it makes him happy because his family's okay and safe, and it's like, he just considers himself lucky that he has this and not everyone else in the Freeland does, and that's why, because for him, it's like, I would take you guys away from this, but it's not fair, because, like, I want to run away from all of it, but it's not fair to, like, you know, us to have this and not everyone else. So that's another reason to stick around, is to make sure other people can have this. And it's this sweet, tender family moment until Odell shows up and screws things up. And it seems like we kind of finally understand what he's doing. Like, Markovia has already had their large scale of metahumans, which is kind of interesting, because it seems like this show is going to obviously become like the next metahuman show, like much like The Flash is, you know? So it's going to be interesting to see what that ends up being, because obviously, like, Freeland is basically going to be the battlefield because so much of the metahuman stuff here would be basically competition for what's going down in Markovia. So it's like we need to wipe out the epicenter of metahumans in Freeland, especially because everything that's going down with the vaccine and green light, this has made Freeland a huge target for what's about to come. And that's what Odell's been doing. Like, he's been training Wendy, he's been pushing for this metahuman stuff, wanting to turn into weapons because he knew about what war was coming. So it's like, you're still a dick about it, but now we understand and get a little more context of why you've been such a dick, because you know the full force of the metahumans that they have under their belt. Now he's like, oh, I know what you guys are. So Black Lightning, Thunder, and whatever your daughter is calling herself, you are being basically brought in under all of this. Now that adds a complicated nature. Of like, if they try and turn him down, he has evidence proving that they are who he knows they are, so he can out them like that, or he can just do the douche thing and just kind of lock them up, you know, probably put Lynn in a very compromised position. We also learn, apparently, he's got, isn't it Isa, the boy who can make people tell the truth? I might be misremembering his name. He has Wendy, of course, and then he has Khalil, so it's like, but Khalil's dead. Not unless he had some stuff put in motion to make it so that Khalil looked like he died, but it's like, maybe he's trying to resurrect, which is interesting because there's the whole Lazarus situation. So it's like, is it going to be a different form of resurrection, or did they put him in a state where it's like he's almost dead but not completely dead until they can get him back in full force or something? So that's definitely going to be interesting because Khalil already came back from a situation, obviously a different person when he became Painkiller. So who will he be when he comes back from this potentially? I mean, we've seen that green light can bring people, I mean, to a certain extent, because Issa was dead at first before he got brought back to life, before the green light activated and brought him back as a metahuman. So maybe we'll see something more along those lines, potentially. I don't know. And that adds an interesting element too, because let's not forget, like, you know, Khalil was like, I want Tobias to be dead, but now it's like, oh, if he's back, will that set him to be like, oh, I need to track down Tobias and kill him? Lala obviously wants Tobias dead, but I mean, last time we saw Lala, he was kind of laying on the floor, messed up. I don't know if he died from all that shock from having all that happen to him, but obviously, like, we're going to see the continuation. I'm so curious to see, like, where do they go beyond this with, you know, because for him it's all about killing Tobias. Like, Tobias still being alive probably makes it so he's not going to be all that keen about sticking around. But obviously, what does that mean for Lazarus? Is he going to continue sending other people potentially after Tobias too? Or, you know, obviously, once again, like, what this would mean for Jennifer if Khalil is back. Obviously, you know, like I was bringing up before, there's the whole Grace situation, which that's a whole thing we still don't 100% know what her situation is, because I guess it could be a green light situation, considering the fact is that we know her background now, so it's like, maybe that makes sense. Because I was like wondering, like, because like, oh, she could have been a green light kid, but it's like, no, she could easily have been, especially now we know her situation, like, to deal with her trauma and stuff like that. Maybe she kind of had a drug issue before and kind of being in a good place with, you know, potentially, you know, Anissa. Maybe it made her kind of, you know, it made her kind of feel bad that, like, it's like the thing is, like, I'm in a good place now, and at moments like that, maybe the past came back to haunt her, or maybe she has been a metahuman for a while. Maybe it has to deal with her past being a metahuman. That's still something we still need to answer. Also, like, you know, what about Jace? Is she going to continue being the Markovian's person to go to about obviously increasing everything that's up with the metahumans? Like, what this war that's coming to Freeland is going to look like. It's definitely going to be interesting. We never also found out about that. I'm assuming that's an ASA thing, but we still never found out who came after Gamby, did we? I don't think Gamby ever really figured that out, so that's another thing. Obviously, the three metas that were left, you know, Marcus, Rebecca, and I just remember his code name, Daryl, that's it. I'm assuming they end up in the pit as well. Not unless Odell ended up snatching them up. So, not unless he ended up snatching up some of the other metahumans that were trying to get away, potentially. I don't know. Black Lightning is coming back for a third season, so I'm very excited to see where they take us going forward into the next season, because a recent conversation has come up to be, like, obviously, like, I didn't realize a lot of people felt like this. It's because I typically don't always hear how people I don't really look up how most people feel about these things, but obviously people felt like this season was a little all over the place, and just I thought it was kind of interesting to me because I feel like this season was a lot of mini arcs within an overarching arc. Like obviously there was the whole overarching story, but there's like a lot of smaller arcs in it because it's even interesting how the season was divided up because there's a lot of different books and like there's like 2 or 3 chapters or 4 chapters in certain books and stuff like that this season. It was just so interesting how everything was kind of handled. So I'm curious, is that going to be something we see going forward into the 3rd season, or will the 3rd season be a lot more focused? Because it's interesting because I feel like this show doesn't have necessarily that villain of the week vibe. It kind of has it, but not necessarily to the extent like other shows have, which to be fair, I'm someone who doesn't mind the whole villain of the week thing. I know a lot of people get tired of that with a show. I'm okay with it, but I get that's not everyone's cup of tea. This show kind of handles it in a very interesting way, so I'm curious to see how they handle this going forward with obviously, like I said, the more threats of new metas coming. And I'm also curious to see how they handle expanding the DC universe, like in this regard of like, once again, like I said, this isn't technically part of the Arrowverse. It's on the CW, but it's its own thing. Also, are there going to be any other shows built off of this? Like, you know, the other rest of the Arrowverse was built off of Arrow, so is there going to be stuff built off of this? Are we going to be expanding upon this universe, or is it just always, I think, you know, the whole point was for it to kind of always stay its own thing. So we'll see going forward whether that remains being the same thing. They loop it in a certain regards. We'll see. It'd be cool if they looped it in, but at the same time, like I said, I'd understand that they want to just keep it separate, just because they probably don't want too many things locked together. It's like you got enough stuff already locked in with the Arrowverse. You don't need more. I mean, which is interesting to me to say that, considering they literally have added, you know, Batwoman to it. So it's just something that was kind of floating through my mind in that regard. So, but a big thing to also consider going forward, obviously, aside from this ASA situation, which that's going to be a strenuous thing on its own, is the fact is now officially 3 members of Lynn's family, you know, obviously Jeff, Anissa, and now, you know, Jennifer, are in this whole crime fighting situation. So that's definitely going to be interesting, like, to see like how their lives change now that all 3 of them are in it. Like, it was bad enough, you know, for Jennifer, it's like, I'm a metahuman, I've got powers and stuff. That was a big thing she was dealing with this season and what that meant for her life. But now it's like I'm a hero and everything now too. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they, you know, how she adjusts to the whole balancing everything else out too. Especially with the Jeff situation, obviously like Garfield High, because obviously he left it over to the current principal. So like what the dynamic at Garfield is going to be like going forward, because obviously there was a lot of animosity between them this season, but obviously Jeff making the decision he did to be like, oh, he's actually doing it, I think we should give him another chance. What does that mean for him and Jeff potentially going forward next season? A lot of stuff I'm very interested to see what they ultimately do with in season 3. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good